Sarah Martinez wiped the sweat from her forehead as she finished her evening jog through Riverside Park. The 18-year-old college student had made this route her daily routine for the past 2 years, always accompanied by her loyal German shepherd, Rex. The bond between them was unbreakable. Rex had been her companion since she was 12, a gift from her father who served overseas in the military. As they walked along the tree-lined path, Sarah noticed something unusual. Thick, dark smoke was rising from the direction of the old warehouse district, just beyond the park's eastern boundary. The acrid smell filled the air, making both Sarah and Rex cough. Rex's ears perked up and he began to whine softly, his instincts telling him something was wrong. Sarah pulled out her phone to call 911 but realized she had forgotten to charge it that morning. The device was completely dead. She looked around the park hoping to find someone else who might have noticed the smoke, but the evening joggers had already headed home, and the park was nearly empty. The nearest houses were at least half a mile away, and by the time she reached them, the fire could spread dangerously. Rex tugged at his leash, pulling toward the smoke. His behavior was odd. Usually he would avoid anything that seemed dangerous, but tonight he seemed determined to investigate. Sarah hesitated for a moment, torn between her safety and her curiosity. The warehouse district had been abandoned for years, and she assumed no one would be there at this hour. But something about Rex's urgency made her reconsider. "What is it, boy?" she asked, kneeling down to look into his intelligent brown eyes. Rex barked once, then ran a few steps toward the smoke before returning to her side. It was almost as if he was trying to tell her something important. Against her better judgment, Sarah decided to get a closer look. She reasoned that if the fire was small, maybe she could help contain it somehow, or at least get a better understanding of how serious the situation was before running for help. The warehouse district was only a 10-minute walk from the park, and she could always turn back if things looked too dangerous. As they approached the area, the smoke became thicker, and Sarah could see orange flames flickering through the broken windows of one of the larger warehouses. The building was 3 stories tall and had been used for manufacturing before the company moved operations overseas. Now it stood as a reminder of the town's industrial past, its broken windows and graffiti-covered walls telling stories of neglect. Rex's behavior became more agitated as they got closer. He was no longer just curious, he was genuinely distressed. He barked loudly and ran toward the burning building, then back to Sarah, repeating this pattern several times. His tail was rigid and his ears were flattened against his head, signs that Sarah had learned to recognize as extreme concern. The heat from the fire was intense, even from 50 yards away. Sarah could hear the crackling of wood and the occasional crash of falling debris inside the building. The fire had clearly been burning for a while, and she wondered why no one else had noticed it yet. The warehouse district was isolated, surrounded by empty lots and abandoned structures, which explained why the fire hadn't been reported. Suddenly, Rex broke free from his leash. Sarah had been holding it loosely, not expecting him to bolt, and the leather strap slipped through her fingers. "Rex, no!" she shouted. But the dog was already running toward the burning building. She chased after him, her heart pounding with fear and adrenaline. Rex stopped at a side entrance to the warehouse, barking frantically at a heavy metal door that was slightly ajar. Sarah caught up to him and grabbed his collar, trying to pull him away from the danger. "Come on, Rex, we need to get out of here," she pleaded, but the dog wouldn't budge. He continued to bark and paw at the door, his behavior becoming more desperate by the minute. That's when Sarah heard it, a faint voice calling for help from inside the building. Her blood ran cold as she realized someone was trapped inside the burning warehouse. The voice was weak and strained, barely audible over the roar of the flames, but it was definitely human. "Hello?" she called out, pressing her face close to the gap in the door. "Is someone in there?" "Help me," came the reply, clearer this time. It was a man's voice, and he sounded like he was in pain. "I'm trapped under some debris. I can't get out." Sarah's mind raced. She knew she should run for help, but by the time she reached the nearest house and the fire department arrived, it might be too late. The fire was spreading quickly and smoke was pouring out of the building at an alarming rate. Whoever was inside didn't have much time. Rex looked up at her with those intelligent eyes as if he understood exactly what she was thinking. He had found the person in need, and now it was up to them to figure out how to help. The dog's instincts had been right all along. There was someone in the building who needed their help. Sarah took a deep breath and made a decision that would change everything. She pushed the metal door open wider, peering into the smoke-filled interior of the warehouse. The visibility was poor, but she could make out a corridor that seemed to lead deeper into the building. The voice had come from somewhere to her left, probably one of the rooms off the main hallway. "I'm coming in," she shouted. "Keep talking so I can find you." "Over here," the voice responded weakly. "I'm in the office near the loading dock." Sarah knew she was taking an enormous risk, but she couldn't live with herself if she left someone to die when she had the chance to help. Rex seemed to sense her determination and stayed close by her side as they entered the burning building together, ready to face whatever dangers lay ahead. The smoke inside the warehouse was overwhelming. Sarah pulled her t-shirt up over her nose and mouth, trying to filter the thick, acrid air that burned her lungs with every breath. Rex stayed close to her legs, his nose low to the ground where the air was slightly clearer. The heat was intense, and Sarah could feel sweat dripping down her back as they made their way through the dark corridor. "Keep talking," Sarah called out, her voice muffled by her makeshift mask. "I need to follow your voice." "Here," came the weak reply. "I'm in the supervisor's office. There's a big metal beam across my legs." Sarah squinted through the smoke, trying to make out the layout of the warehouse. Emergency lighting had probably failed long ago, and the only illumination came from the orange glow of flames deeper in the building. Rex seemed to have better vision in the poor conditions, and he began to lead the way, occasionally looking back to make sure Sarah was following. They reached what appeared to be an office area with several small rooms branching off from the main corridor. The smoke was thinner here, allowing Sarah to see more clearly. Rex stopped at the second doorway and barked once, then entered the room. Sarah followed and immediately saw the trapped man. He was wearing a police uniform, and Sarah could make out a badge on his chest despite the dim lighting. The officer appeared to be in his 40s, with graying hair and a mustache. A large metal beam had fallen across his legs, pinning him to the floor behind an overturned desk. His face was pale, and there was blood on his forehead from what looked like a head injury. "Officer," Sarah said, rushing to his side. "What happened? How did you get trapped in here?" The policeman's name tag read Martinez, no relation to Sarah despite the shared surname. He tried to sit up straighter but winced in pain. "I was investigating reports of suspicious activity in this area. Someone said they saw lights in the warehouse late at night. I came to check it out, and part of the ceiling collapsed on me. I think my radio is broken, and my phone is somewhere under that debris." Sarah examined the metal beam that had him trapped. It was part of an old support structure, probably weakened by years of neglect and finally brought down by the intense heat of the fire. The beam was heavy, far too heavy for Sarah to lift on her own. She tried pushing it, but it barely budged. Rex sniffed around the trapped officer, then gently licked his hand. Officer Martinez managed a weak smile despite his pain. "Smart dog," he said. "He found me when no one else could." "We need to get you out of here," Sarah said, looking around the office for anything that might help. "The fire is spreading, and this whole building could come down." "Listen to me," Officer Martinez said, his voice becoming more urgent. "You need to get yourself and your dog out of here right now. Don't worry about me. I've already radioed for backup before I got trapped, but it might take a while for them to find me." Sarah shook her head firmly. "I'm not leaving you here. There has to be something we can use as a lever to move this beam." She spotted an old metal pipe in the corner of the office, probably left behind by construction workers years ago. It was about 4 feet long and looked sturdy enough to use as a pry bar. Sarah grabbed it and positioned it under the beam, using a chunk of concrete as a fulcrum point. "On the count of 3, try to pull your legs out," she instructed.
1, 2, 3.
Sarah put all her weight behind the lever, and the beam lifted slightly but not enough for the officer to free himself. Rex seemed to understand what was happening and grabbed the officer's uniform sleeve in his teeth, trying to help pull him to safety. "It's moving a little," Officer Martinez said through gritted teeth. "But I think my leg might be broken. I can't get enough leverage to pull myself free." The smoke in the room was getting thicker, and Sarah could hear the fire getting closer. Somewhere in the building, glass was shattering, and the sound of collapsing structures echoed through the halls. Time was running out quickly. "We need more weight on this lever," Sarah said, thinking frantically. She looked around the office again and spotted an old filing cabinet that had been knocked over in the ceiling collapse. "Rex, help me move this." Rex immediately understood and began pushing against the filing cabinet with his powerful shoulders, while Sarah pulled it toward the beam. Together they managed to position it so that Sarah could use it as additional leverage. Okay, this time should work, Sarah said, positioning herself to push down on the longer end of the pipe. When I lift the beam, you need to slide out as fast as you can, even if it hurts. Officer Martinez nodded, preparing himself for what he knew would be excruciating pain. Rex positioned himself near the officer's shoulders, ready to help pull him to safety the moment his legs were free. Here we go, Sarah said, and threw all her strength into the lever. The filing cabinet added just enough extra weight to lift the beam several inches higher than before. Officer Martinez cried out in pain, but managed to slide his legs out from under the crushing weight just as Sarah's. Strength gave out and the beam crashed back to the floor. Rex immediately began licking the officer's face, his tail wagging with relief. But their celebration was short-lived. The smoke in the room had become so thick that Sarah could barely see her own hands, and the temperature was rising rapidly. Orange light flickered in the doorway, indicating that the fire had reached their section of the building. "Can you walk?" Sarah asked, helping Officer Martinez sit up. He tried to put weight on his legs and immediately gasped in pain. "My left leg is definitely broken," he said. "I don't think I can make it out of here on my own." Sarah looked at Rex and an idea began to form in her mind. Her dog was strong and intelligent, and she had trained him in basic rescue commands when she was younger, inspired by her father's military service. If anyone could help get them all out of this situation, it would be Rex. "We're going to get out of here together," she told Officer Martinez with more confidence than she felt. "Rex is going to help us, and we're all going home tonight." Sarah quickly assessed their situation. The corridor they had used to enter was now blocked by flames, and smoke was pouring into the office through the doorway. Officer Martinez was conscious but unable to walk on his injured leg. They needed to find another way out, and they needed to find it fast. Rex began sniffing around the edges of the office, his nose working overtime to detect any air currents that might indicate another exit. Dogs had incredible senses, and Sarah had learned to trust Rex's instincts completely over the years they had been together. "There has to be another way out of here," Sarah said, more to herself than to Officer Martinez. She remembered that warehouses typically had multiple exits for safety reasons, including loading docks and emergency exits that might not be visible from their current position. Rex stopped at what appeared to be a solid wall and began pawing at it. Sarah moved closer and realized it wasn't a wall at all, but a large metal sliding door that had been painted the same color as the surrounding walls. Her heart leaped with hope as she found the handle and tried to pull the door open. The door was heavy and seemed to be stuck, probably rusted shut after years of disuse. Sarah put all her strength into it, but it barely moved an inch. The handle was old and difficult to grip, and her hands were sweaty from the heat and stress of the situation. "Let me help," Officer Martinez said, dragging himself across the floor toward the door. Even with his injured leg, he was determined to contribute to their escape. "If we both pull at the same time, we might be able to get it open." Sarah helped position him so he could grab the bottom of the door while she worked on the handle. Rex seemed to understand what they were trying to do and began digging at the base of the door, trying to create more space for it to slide. "On three," Sarah said. "1, 2, 3. They pulled together, and this time the door moved several inches, creating a gap large enough for them to see what was on the other side. Cool. Fresh air rushed through the opening, and Sarah could see stars in the night sky beyond. It was a loading dock that faced the back of the warehouse away from the main fire. "We did it," Officer Martinez said, breathing heavily from the exertion. "That's our way out." But their relief was short-lived. The gap was still too narrow for them to fit through, especially with Officer Martinez's injured leg. They needed to open the door much wider, and Sarah wasn't sure they had the strength to do it. Rex squeezed through the narrow gap and disappeared outside. For a moment, Sarah panicked, thinking her loyal companion had abandoned them, but within seconds Rex was back, and he had something in his mouth, a thick piece of wood that looked like it had come from a shipping pallet. The intelligent dog dropped the wood at Sarah's feet and barked once. Sarah immediately understood. Rex had found them a tool to use as a lever to pry the door open wider. "You're brilliant, Rex," Sarah said, scratching behind his ears. She positioned the piece of wood in the door track and used it to lever the door open inch by inch. The wood was sturdy enough to give them the mechanical advantage they needed, and soon the opening was wide enough for a person to crawl through. The loading dock was about 4 feet off the ground, with a steep metal ramp leading down to the parking area behind the warehouse. Sarah could see that the fire had not yet reached this side of the building, giving them a clear escape route to safety. "You go first," Officer Martinez insisted. "I'll be right behind you." Sarah shook her head. "We're leaving together. I'm not abandoning you after we've come this far." Rex had already jumped down to the loading dock and was looking up at them expectantly. Sarah climbed through the opening first, then turned back to help Officer Martinez. The injured policeman gritted his teeth against the pain and managed to pull himself through the gap, with Sarah supporting his weight. Getting down from the loading dock was the next challenge. Officer Martinez couldn't put any weight on his broken leg, and the drop to the ground was too far for him to manage safely. Sarah looked around for something to help and spotted an old wooden crate near the edge of the dock. "If I can get that crate positioned right, you can use it as a step," Sarah said, jumping down to move the crate into place. Rex helped by pushing against it with his shoulder, and together they created a makeshift stairway. Officer Martinez slowly lowered himself down, using the crate and Sarah's support to reach the ground safely. Once they were all on solid ground, they moved away from the warehouse as quickly as possible. The officer leaned heavily on Sarah's shoulder, hopping on his good leg as they made their way toward the parking area. Behind them, the fire had grown significantly. Flames were now visible through windows on all 3 floors of the warehouse, and the sound of collapsing structures was becoming more frequent. Black smoke billowed into the night sky, and the heat was intense even from their safe distance. "We made it just in time," Officer Martinez said, breathing heavily. "Another few minutes and that whole section would have been engulfed." Rex ran ahead of them, then circled back, his tail wagging with excitement and relief. The dog seemed to understand that they had successfully escaped a dangerous situation, and his behavior showed his happiness at having everyone safe. As they reached the edge of the warehouse district, Sarah could hear sirens in the distance. The fire department was finally on its way, probably alerted by other residents who had noticed the smoke and flames. Red and blue lights flashed on the horizon, growing brighter as the emergency vehicles approached. "Thank you," Officer Martinez said, looking at both Sarah and Rex. "If you two hadn't found me, I would never have made it out of there alive." Sarah felt a mixture of exhaustion and elation. They had faced incredible danger and managed to save a life in the process. Rex had been the real hero, using his keen senses to locate the trapped officer and his intelligence to help with their escape. But their story was far from over. The events of this night would have consequences and recognition that none of them could have imagined as they stood watching the warehouse burn in the distance. The first fire truck arrived within minutes, followed by an ambulance and 2 police cars. Sarah waved frantically to get their attention, and soon paramedics were rushing toward them with a stretcher and medical equipment. The scene became a flurry of activity as emergency responders took control of the situation. "We have an injured officer here," Sarah called out to the paramedics. "His leg is broken and he has a head injury." The paramedics immediately went to work examining Officer Martinez, checking his vital signs and carefully immobilizing his injured leg. One of them, a woman in her 30s with kind eyes, turned to Sarah with concern. "Are you injured?" she asked, noticing Sarah's soot-covered clothes and the smell of smoke that clung to her hair. "Did you inhale a lot of smoke?" Sarah shook her head, though she did feel a bit dizzy from the experience. "I'm okay," she said. "We managed to get out before it got too bad." Rex sat quietly beside Sarah, his fur singed in a few places but otherwise unharmed. The dog seemed calm now that help had arrived, but he stayed close to both Sarah and Officer Martinez, as if he was still protecting them. Fire Chief Robert Sullivan approached the group as his crew began battling the warehouse blaze. He was a tall man with gray hair and a weathered face that spoke of decades of emergency response experience. "Can someone tell me what happened here?" Chief Sullivan asked, pulling out a small notebook. "How did you end up inside that building?" Sarah and Officer Martinez took turns explaining the events of the evening, with Sarah describing how Rex had led her to the trapped policeman and how they had worked together to escape through the loading dock. Chief Sullivan listened intently, occasionally asking questions for clarification. "That dog of yours has incredible instincts," Chief Sullivan said, looking down at Rex with admiration. "Most animals would have run away from a fire, but he led you right to someone who needed help." Detective Maria Gonzalez from the local police department joined the conversation as Officer Martinez was being loaded into the ambulance. She had been called to investigate the circumstances surrounding the fire and Officer Martinez's presence at the warehouse. "Officer Martinez, Detective Gonzalez said, leaning close to the ambulance. Can you tell me more about why you were investigating this warehouse? Officer Martinez, now receiving oxygen from the paramedics, managed to speak clearly despite his injuries. We've had reports of suspicious activity in this area for the past few weeks. People seeing lights at night, vehicles coming and going. I came to check it out alone, which I know was against protocol. What did you find inside before the ceiling collapsed? Detective Gonzalez asked. There were signs that someone had been using the building, Officer Martinez replied. Sleeping bags, food containers, drug paraphernalia. It looked like it might have been a temporary shelter or meeting place for people involved in illegal activities. Detective Gonzalez made notes in her report, then turned to Sarah. What you and your dog did tonight was incredibly brave, but also very dangerous. You could have been killed going into that building. Sarah understood the detective's concern, but she didn't regret her decision. Rex knew someone was in trouble, she said simply. I couldn't have lived with myself if we had just walked away. As the ambulance prepared to leave for the hospital, Officer Martinez called Sarah over to speak with him one more time. His face was pale, but his eyes were alert and grateful. I want you to know that what you did tonight goes beyond just saving my life, he said quietly. I have a daughter about your age and a wife who's been worried sick since I didn't come home on time. Because of you and Rex, I get to see them again. Tears welled up in Sarah's eyes as the full impact of their actions hit her. This wasn't just about rescuing someone from a fire. They had helped preserve a family and prevented a tragedy that would have affected many people. The ambulance drove away with its sirens wailing, and Sarah found herself alone with Rex and the various emergency personnel who were still working to contain the fire. The warehouse was a total loss, but the firefighters had managed to prevent the blaze from spreading to nearby buildings. Chief Sullivan approached Sarah again as his crew began the process of putting out the remaining hotspots. I've been doing this job for 25 years, he said, and I've rarely seen such quick thinking and bravery from a civilian. You should be very proud of yourself. Rex is the real hero, Sarah said, kneeling down to hug her dog. I just followed his lead. That may be true, Chief Sullivan replied, but you made the decision to trust him and take action when it mattered most. Not everyone would have done that. Detective Gonzalez returned from interviewing some of the firefighters and had more questions for Sarah. We're going to need you to come to the station tomorrow to give a full statement about what you saw inside the warehouse. Your testimony could be important for our investigation into the illegal activities that Officer Martinez was investigating. Sarah nodded, understanding that her involvement in the night's events was far from over. There would be reports to file, interviews to give, and probably media attention that she wasn't prepared for. As the emergency vehicles began to leave the scene and the fire was finally under control, Sarah and Rex started their walk home. The events of the evening felt surreal, like something that had happened to someone else. Just hours ago, they had been taking a routine evening jog, and now they had saved a police officer's life and helped solve a criminal investigation. Rex trotted beside Sarah with his head held high, seeming to understand that he had done something special. Other dogs might have run away from danger, but Rex had run toward it because he knew someone needed help. His instincts and loyalty had made all the difference in the world. Sarah's phone, which she had charged at the fire station, began buzzing with text messages from friends and family who had heard about the fire on the local news. Word was already spreading about the young woman and her dog who had rescued a police officer from a burning building. But for Sarah, the most important thing was that Officer Martinez was alive and on his way to the hospital, where he would recover from his injuries. Everything else, and the attention, the interviews, the recognition, was secondary to that simple fact. 3 weeks after the warehouse fire, Sarah found herself standing in the grand hall of City Hall, wearing her best dress and feeling nervous about the ceremony that was about to begin. Rex sat beside her, wearing a special collar that had been provided for the occasion, his coat brushed to perfection, and his metal gleaming in the morning sunlight that streamed through the tall windows. The local news stations had picked up the story within days of the fire, and it had quickly spread to national media. Local girl and her dog save police officer from burning building had been the headline in newspapers across the country. Social media had exploded with praise for both Sarah and Rex, with thousands of people sharing their story and calling them heroes. Mayor Jennifer Adams took the podium to address the crowd that had gathered for the ceremony. Among the attendees were Sarah's parents, who had flown in from across the country, Fire Chief Sullivan, Detective Gonzalez, and most importantly, Officer Martinez and his family. Officer Martinez was walking with crutches but had made a full recovery from his injuries. His wife Elena and their 16-year-old daughter Carmen sat in the front row, their faces beaming with gratitude and pride. They had insisted on being present for the ceremony to thank Sarah and Rex personally for bringing their husband and father home safely. Today, we gather to recognize extraordinary courage and heroism displayed by two members of our community. Mayor Adams began. Sarah Martinez and her dog Rex demonstrated that heroism comes in many forms, and that sometimes the greatest acts of bravery happen when ordinary people make extraordinary choices. The mayor went on to describe the events of that night, emphasizing how Sarah's quick thinking and Rex's incredible instincts had saved Officer Martinez's life. She spoke about the investigation that had followed, which revealed that the warehouse had indeed been being used as a base for drug trafficking operations. The fire had been set deliberately to destroy evidence, making Officer Martinez's survival and testimony crucial to the case. The courage shown by Sarah and Rex that night not only saved a life, but also helped our police department solve an important case that has made our community safer. Mayor Adams continued. Sarah felt her cheeks burning with embarrassment as the mayor continued to praise their actions. She had never sought recognition for what they had done. It had simply felt like the right thing to do at the time. Beside her, Rex seemed more comfortable with the attention, his tail wagging gently as he looked out at the crowd. When Mayor Adams called them forward to receive their awards, Sarah's legs felt shaky as she walked to the podium with Rex at her side. The mayor presented Sarah with a certificate of heroism and a key to the city, while Rex received a special medal designed specifically for animal heroes. This medal, Mayor Adams said, fastening it around Rex's neck, is inscribed with the words courage, loyalty, and service, three qualities that Rex demonstrated in abundance that night. The crowd erupted in applause, and Sarah could see that many people in the audience were wiping away tears. She spotted Officer Martinez's family in the front row, all three of them crying tears of joy and gratitude. After the formal ceremony, there was a reception where Sarah and Rex were able to meet with the attendees and hear their stories. An elderly woman approached them with tears in her eyes, explaining that her grandson was a police officer in another city, and that the story had given her hope about the kindness that still existed in the world. A young boy, probably about 10 years old, shyly approached Rex and asked if he could pet him. Rex gently lowered his head so the boy could reach, and Sarah watched as the child's face lit up with wonder at meeting a real-life hero dog. "I want to train my dog to be brave like Rex," the boy told Sarah earnestly. "Can you teach me how?" Sarah spent several minutes talking with the boy about responsible pet ownership and the importance of trust and communication between dogs and their owners. She explained that Rex hadn't been trained to be a rescue dog. He had simply followed his instincts and his love for helping others. Officer Martinez approached them during the reception, moving slowly on his crutches but determined to speak with them personally. His wife Elena and daughter Carmen accompanied him, and all three of them looked emotional. "Sarah," Officer Martinez said, his voice thick with gratitude, "I don't think I'll ever be able to properly thank you for what you did. You and Rex gave me my life back, and you gave my family their husband and father back." Elena Martinez stepped forward and hugged Sarah tightly. "You're so young to have shown such incredible courage," she said. "I hope my daughter grows up to be as brave and selfless as you are." Carmen, Officer Martinez's daughter, had prepared something special for the occasion. She presented Rex with a handmade toy that she had sewn herself, a small police officer doll that squeaked when squeezed. "I made this for Rex," Carmen said, kneeling down to the dog's level. "I wanted him to have something to remember my dad by, and to remember that what he did mattered so much to our family." Rex gently took the toy in his mouth, his tail wagging enthusiastically. He seemed to understand that it was a gift made with love, and he carried it proudly for the rest of the event. As the reception wound down, Fire Chief Sullivan approached Sarah with an unexpected proposal. "We've been talking about starting a community emergency response program," he said. "We think you and Rex would be perfect ambassadors for the program. Would you be interested in helping us train other community members in basic emergency response?" Sarah was intrigued by the idea. The events of that night had sparked an interest in emergency services that she hadn't expected. "What would that involve?" she asked. "Mostly education and training," Chief Sullivan explained. "Teaching people how to recognize emergencies, when to call for help, and basic first aid. Rex could help us demonstrate how animals can be valuable partners in emergency situations." Sarah looked down at Rex, who was still proudly carrying his new toy. The idea of using their experience to help others seemed like a natural next step, a way to turn their moment of heroism into something that could benefit the entire community. "We'd love to help," Sarah said without hesitation. As they left City Hall that day, Sarah reflected on how much her life had changed since that evening in the park. She had started college planning to study business, but now she was considering a career in emergency services or social work. The experience had shown her the importance of being ready to help others, and the satisfaction that came from making a real difference in someone's life. Rex trotted beside her, his medal gleaming in the afternoon sun and his new toy still clutched gently in his mouth. The dog had always been special to Sarah, but now the whole world knew what she had known all along, that Rex was truly extraordinary. The story of the girl and her dog who saved a police officer from a burning building had touched hearts across the nation, but for Sarah, the most important outcome was much simpler. Officer Martinez had gone home to his family that night, and would continue to go home to them for many years to come. That, more than any medal or recognition, was the real reward for their actions that night.